San Francisco, City of Peace, birthplace of the United Nations. This is a city of special significance to Baha'is. During a visit to the city in 1912, Abdu'l-Baha expresses the wish that the banner of universal peace might first be raised in San Francisco. In 1945, the representatives of 50 nations gather here to form an organization that would, in the words of the Charter, put an end forever to the scourge of war. That dream would prove to be elusive, and the process of building peace complex and difficult. On the 40th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations, the Universal House of Justice, the supreme governing body of the Baha'i community, issues to the peoples of the world a statement entitled, "The Promise of World Peace." The statement is presented to heads of state and leaders of thought worldwide, eloquently proclaiming the urgency of the issue, sharply delineating the barriers to peace, and clearly enunciating the steps that must be taken to establish world peace. More than 1 million copies of the statement are distributed in over 200 countries. In San Francisco, the first International Baha'i Peace Conference is called to proclaim, to discuss, and to celebrate the promise of world peace. People of all races, classes, and religions, artists, scientists, jurists, and academics are invited to join the Baha'is in a fresh effort to establish the great peace. Distinguished guests include Irvin Laszlo, editor of the Encyclopedia of Peace, Reverend Malalapula Chabaku, exiled South African civil rights leader, Frank Newman, retired Justice of the California Supreme Court, Cecilia Burciaga, Associate Dean of Graduate Studies and Research at Stanford University, Craig Schindler, lawyer, psychologist, and co-founder of Project Victory, Jeff Foe, president of the Economic Policy Institute in Washington, D.C., Annie Dodge Wanika, Navajo tribal leader and the first American Indian to be awarded the Medal of Freedom, Rian Eisler, author of the Equal Rights Handbook and the Chalice and the Blade, David Loy, co-director of the Institute for Futures Forecasting in Carmel, California, Robert Bella, prominent sociologist of religion from the University of California at Berkeley, Thomas Banyaka, an intercultural interpreter of the spiritual traditions of the Hopi, C. Eric Lincoln, professor of religion at Duke University and author of Race, Religion, and the Continuing American Dilemma, and Roshan Villamoria, chairwoman of the Executive Committee of the Non-Governmental Organizations of the United Nations. The conference is a celebration of unity and diversity, reflecting the Baha'i understanding that the conscious recognition of the oneness of mankind is a fundamental prerequisite for world peace.
Listen, can you hear the sound of hearts beating all the world around? High on the mountain, down on the plain, everywhere around the world, the heartbeat sounds the same. Black or white, red or tan, it's the heart of the family of man. Whoa, beating away. Whoa, beating away. Whoa, it's beating away. Listen, can you hear the sound of laughter? All the world around. Down in the valley, down by the sea, everywhere around the world, laughter sounds the same to me. Black or white, red or tan, it's the sound of the family of man. Whoa! La la all the world around. Walking through the jungle on a busy city street. Everywhere around the world, singing always sounds so sweet. Black or white, red or tan, it's the sound of the family of man. Whoa, singing away. 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 Whoa, everybody. Whoa, singing away. Whoa, singing away. Whoa, singing away. Whoa, singing away. Whoa, singing
Peace today seems to be a long way off, but mankind is coming of age. Among you, I'm convinced that mankind is on the threshold of adulthood. This has been a demonstration that has deeply moved me this morning, seeing these young people dance, perform unity in diversity, and seeing all of you here today. If this experience here can be repeated outside in the world at large, mankind indeed will come of age, and the prophecy of Baha'u'llah will be fulfilled.
It was a special and necessary privilege for me to be part of this very historic and memorable conference. I'm saying necessary because of the crucial times in which we live, where there is so much tension and so much violence, so much insecurity, that what has always been available to us had to be brought back to the fore. And I felt that it was God-timed that I, being a South African woman from Johannesburg, South Africa, from Soweto, a high school mate of Bishop Desmond Tutu, could be part of this conference to help bring in the global context of it.
I have been very, very deeply moved by what I've experienced here. And something that I said earlier was that, yes, I was trying to think of a simile, of a comparison. And what I could really think of was that, in a sense, it made me think of what it must have been like in the early so-called primitive Christian movement. Except in a way, better, because what we're trying to do, what you're trying to create here, is a better society right here on earth, not only in a hereafter.
And this is the first time I have come into this Bahai organization. I met some of them on the road, but this is the first time that I felt so strong that we are now working towards a one world thing that we're talking about, peaceful world, harmonious world, sharing everything together. We are one people again, like we was from the start.
When I was coming here on a bus, a man looked at me and he said, "I think you're Persian and you've forgotten your language." I said, "No, I'm Mexican and I still speak Spanish." But he said, we're all the same. Black, white, brown, we're all the same. One God. That kind of belief leads to a world community. It leads us to think of the interdependence of the globe.
It's a great honor to be invited to this extraordinary event. My only reservation is that I'm not sure that I have much to bring you that you don't already know. In reading over the promise of world peace, I found the statement so close to my own deepest concerns that, in a sense, all I can do is try to reinforce you in the direction you've already taken.
As a non-member and very supportive fellow traveler of the Baha'i community, I want to tell you that I think the statement of the Universal House of Justice and the call for a world convocation is one of the most elegant and profound documents that I have ever read. The spirit in this room reminds me of a quote from Teilhard de Chardin. He said, "The future belongs to those who give the next generation reasons to hope."
Beyond all war, the children will feel no pain. Light out the world and make the sun rise again. We will survive and climb to the highest heights. We need to believe in love. Open our eyes and see the dawn of another time. We won't destroy the joy that God has given tonight. Beyond all war, we must endure with faith. Go through the storm and see through this worldly haze. One day we'll learn to cherish the gift of love, and we'll see the we'll see the
Senior Baha'i institutions, the Continental Board of Counselors and the National Spiritual Assembly, are active leaders in the work for peace.
119 years ago, Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, addressed the kings and rulers of the world. And he said that a golden age of humanity was dawning. He said that the winds of despair, alas, are blowing from every direction, and the strife that divides and afflicts the human race is daily increasing. The signs of impending convulsions and chaos can now be discerned, inasmuch as the prevailing order is lamentably defective. And then he turned around and he said, but never mind all that, because an age so powerful that it represents the consummation of human evolution is dawning. An age so stupendous it defies our imagination. The sun of that age is rising. Prejudice, war, exploitation, strife, these are expressions of the immature stages of our development. And the unavoidable tumult that these realities create should not be the reason for despair, but instead should be understood as a necessary prerequisite to understanding the stupendous undertaking of developing a peaceful world. We have not gone through all this for nothing. We haven't lived our lives and suffered our losses and killed each other and enslaved each other and built lives that represented walls that kept us apart. We haven't gone through all that simply to annihilate one another. We have gone through that to learn and to grow and to achieve a new level of life. And we called this conference to say all this and to say that the role of religion is a vital one, because the peace that we aim to establish will not be the reflection of treaties and agencies of international cooperation and agreement. It will be the reflection of a new inner state, a spiritual and moral attitude that must be rekindled in the hearts of men and women throughout the world, and that is our role. We cannot be closed off by this paralysis of will that afflicts our brothers and sisters. We have to show them by the way we live, and by the friendships that we make, and by the obstacles that we overcome to break down the barriers from one heart to another, from one culture to another, from one race to another, from one class to another, from one sex to another. We have to break down those barriers and show by our example, by the way we live our lives, by the way we confront our struggles, that there is a better way. And it is both practical and spiritual. And we have to show that, and we can show that.
Come on, everybody. The power of love, well, it's a curious thing. Make one man weep and another man sing. Change your heart to wiser. More than a feeling, that's the power of love.
We change peace all the world around. You and me, every city, every town. One by one in our work and in our play. We teaching peace by what we do and what we say.
Yeah, let's try peace for a while. Love each other and share a smile. Life may be better than it's been before. And with a change of attitude, if the whole world don't improve, we can always go back to making war. Woman, you are the key to peace. When your voice is heard, all war will cease. Woman, you are the key to peace. When your voice is heard, all war will cease.
Peace. Say love. Scream unity. That's what it means to me. I get deep, get out of the street. Stop running with the fools and acting like a creep. I get deep, but don't get weak. Just give me your attention and don't fall asleep.
We can move the world. We can shake the world. We can love the world. We can bring the world together. Yeah.
I am feeling like I wanna stay here. The feel of love so strong, I think I can pray. Yeah. It's a garden of colors and peace and unity. Maybe that's the way for you and me. Well, could be the color of you. Could be the color of you. Could be the color of you. Could be the color of you and you and you and you, of you and you and you and you too. You and you and
But let me just say a few words now about the unique responsibility that you have as members of the Baha'i community. A responsibility that I myself accept as scientist, as humanist, but that many more people should accept, whether they base themselves on faith or on science. The responsibility that you have is a unique one because you alone, I think, of all the communities of the world, form a global community committed to the belief, to the conviction that peace will come, that peace requires unity, and the unity is only possible in a global society. Therefore, you are committed to the creation of a global society. You already have created a global society among yourself.
I always ask myself, what's the evidence? You know, people can say they're for peace, but what substance is really there? What is hopeful? And that is something that I've felt so much over the past 3 days, a sense of hope again.
As a scientist, I can cite 3 specifics that have tremendously impressed me. One is the Baha'i recognition that linked intimately to peace is the equality between women and men. This goes back to early statements by the Baha'i leaders, with the direct link to peace coming out in more recent times. This tremendous statement that the promise of peace expresses this. The second tenet that has impressed me about the Baha'i direct connection to peace is this prohibition against prejudice. I know of, a few other things that make it so apparent. The way, of bringing about peace is to cut out this tendency toward division and toward downgrading one people versus another. And the third thing is the Baha'i tenet on ethics in the workplace. To me, as a social scientist, creates an extremely powerful social dynamic leading inevitably to peace.
Peace. That's what we need now, peace. There's a little confusion amongst us, but I think peace should straighten that out. I'm not going to talk about that. Peace was something that will correct some of these situations. We'll have to learn to understand each other because we're as human as ever, everywhere.
So this conference affirmed, strengthened me, and I met the most beautiful people. I have never met many of them. Some I just met, but it seems as if I'd known them for 20 years. It's the warmth, the love, and the encouragement, and the challenge that is here. And if we can meet and relate so well, coming from different nations, different religions, different classes, different sexes, and still find our oneness because we belong to one race, the human race. This is the answer that needs to be lived, not just talked about.
Beyond War will tell you that a nuclear chain reaction starts when a sufficient amount of fissionable material is brought together under conditions of extreme pressure. A critical mass is formed and becomes self-generating. This concept, which we think of in terms of global holocaust, has to be turned around and to be thought of as central to thinking about social change. This is a critical mass already for a nuclear chain reaction, but a nuclear chain reaction that would lead to the domino effect of more and more and more of us thinking about salvation and peace versus defensiveness and destruction.
I hear the sound of the beating of distant drums. I know the sun of truth has finally shone. Let the fire
around us. Come on, everybody. Open our eyes to spirits that light within. Break down the walls, let all that love come in. Let's make the whole world smile, smile on creation. Let's make the world unite, unite as one nation. Everybody say that, woo!
I want to tell you that I think the statement of the Universal House of Justice and the call for a world convocation is one of the most elegant and profound documents that I have ever read.
I just am profoundly moved and much more hopeful about peace since I've been here.
It's the warmth, the love, and the encouragement, and the challenge that is here.
Peace. That's what we need now, peace.
If this experience here can be repeated outside, in the world at large, mankind indeed will come of age, and the prophecy of Baha'u'llah will be fulfilled.
We got black Baha'is, white Baha'is, Persian Baha'is, Chinese Baha'is, Indian Baha'is, rich Baha'is, in between Baha'is, dirt poor Baha'is, you name it, we got them.
120 years ago, a prophet appeared in Persia and proclaimed a new religion. He said he was the latest messenger of God, sent with a vision that would change the world, a message of peace and unity, under one all-embracing faith, God's kingdom on earth. Today, the Baha'i faith claims to be the fastest-growing new religion in the world, with over 3 million followers. But in the land of its birth, Iran, it is being persecuted.
You never know when or whom they are going to arrest or release or kill. The mullahs or the government do that because they want to frighten the Baha'i community.
They died for the cause which they believe on, and I believe on, and all the Baha'is believe on. So at least I'm happy that, my father was not dying for something, ridiculous. He died for something which he believes, and we believe on.
February 1979, the triumph of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. The world watched as the Shah's regime was toppled and a new revolutionary republic was born. Its leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, returned from 16 years in exile to an ecstatic welcome.
His first words were, as expected, forceful and to the point. This is the first step in the final defeat of 50 years of criminal rule. We must cut off the hands of the foreigners who are responsible for our ills and cast out all the roots of the old regime.
Khomeini's words left no doubt about the aim of the revolution, to ensure the supremacy of fundamentalist Islam in every area of Iranian life. When the new Islamic constitution was drafted, religious freedom was granted to all groups with the exception of one, Iran's 300,000 Baha'is, the country's largest religious minority. The Baha'i community had faced repression in Iran since the foundation of their faith, but now there were signs of a new and systematic persecution, apparently authorized and encouraged by the ruling Muslim clergy.
In Iran, the aim of the mullahs is to force the Baha'is to give up their religion, so they become Muslims. And their way of doing that is to kill the leader, to terrorize the average Baha'i. He can't have a bank account, his children can't go to school, their properties have been confiscated, they have been fired from their jobs, all the old people have had their pensions canceled. In fact, insane as it may sound, they've been told they must pay back all the salary they received over the years that they were employed. They have no protection against anything that a mob wants to do to them, and their houses are ransacked regularly and freely by any of their neighbors who are disposed.
Examples of intimidation come in many forms. This secretly shot film shows the destruction of the Baha'is' most holy shrine in Shiraz. These documents are official government dismissal letters. This one tells a Baha'i that he'll be sacked unless he converts to Islam. A 9-year-old school report says his work is excellent, but, as his headmaster notes, since his parents are Baha'is, he's being expelled. Many photographs show cemeteries desecrated, properties and businesses destroyed, Baha'is' homes burned and ransacked. For some, it has meant jail, and worse.
They tied me to a bed, and then they beat the sores on my face. I can't remember that after how many lashes, but I think maybe after 25 or 30 lashes, I didn't feel anything and I became unconscious. Then again, when I came in, they started beating me again. And when they were beating me, they were asking me to become Muslim. And after that, I remember that they forced me to walk on my injured feet. They do that just because they want you to feel a lot of pain. And they do it to all the prisoners who are tortured. Some of the other women also were beaten. I remember one of the ladies, she was old. She was about 56 years old. And she was beaten on 3 successive days. And she couldn't walk on her feet. And she told me, she herself told me she didn't want to ask the guards, but she had a lot of pain. She felt a lot of pain that she asked the prisoner guard to let her to walk on her knees, but they didn't let her to do that. And they forced her to walk on her feet just to feel a lot of pain. What happened to her? She was executed. She was the first lady who was executed in Shiraz.
During the next months, the killings were to increase. On the 18th of June, 1983, 10 Baha'i women were taken from their cells at Shiraz prison and hanged.
These women were very close to me, especially one of those, Shirin, was my closest friend, and all the time we were together. Even they arrested her in our place. And at that time, I was out of the country. Then I heard on radio. For a few hours I couldn't do anything. And I felt that I have lost my heart. And I felt empty. But later on, I prayed and I've got that feeling that now I am proud of them, deep in my heart, that they died, why they didn't deny their faith.
The Iranian government insists that no Baha'i is persecuted for religious reasons, but officials are reluctant to be interviewed on the subject. Its embassy in London wouldn't speak on camera, but told us that any evidence of persecution on religious grounds is forged. Torture victims are actors. They said that in Tehran their government had conclusive evidence that Baha'is are political spies and counter-revolutionaries.
Well, let me put it this way. They have had total power. They had all the secret police files. Now they've had it for 6 years. They have ransacked them. If there were a single document justifying their charge that Baha'is are engaged in espionage, you would have seen it published in protestats in the Times or the Guardian or the New York Times.
These pictures smuggled out of Iran show the bodies of Baha'is immediately after execution. Painted on one leg are the words, "Enemy of Islam." At least 200 Baha'is have been killed since the revolution. The leaders are special targets. All save one of these Baha'i assembly members have been executed or have disappeared, presumed dead. Fatollah Ferdowsi was arrested in 1981. His son, Ferhan, was put in jail with him.
Every day they were taking us to another room, which was kind of their headquarters or something, and making us sitting in a floor, blindfolded. Every 10-15 minutes, somebody would come and ask, who is the Baha'i? Because beside us, there were some other prisoners there. And we would raise our hands, and immediately they start beating us by kicking us, slapping, and sometimes by rubber hoses. And that was kind of every day their workout, every day.
Ferhan's father convinced the authorities that his son was needed at the family import business to keep production going. So Ferhan was released, but his father remained in jail.
After I came out, I start to do as much as I can, see if I can release my father. So I start talking to some of our friends. One of them, who were a good friend of Attorney General, I asked him if he can do anything about it. A couple days later, he told me that he had a discussion with him. And his word was that if they were murderers, if they were in a drug dealer or anything else, I could do that for you. But if they are Baha'i, no. And he said, don't mention it any other place. We received a call from Evin prison. All they mentioned that tomorrow to come to such and such office, which normally that's the way which they do. So we knew that they have been executed. Of course, when we went in there, they denied. They said, no, we didn't call. And that's a normal practice for them, just to harass them. But we went with the place which they keep the records of the people who have been executed. And we found out that 3 days before, which they called us, they had been executed, all the members of the assembly, and they buried in some place outside the city.
New York, the United Nations. The UN has become the focal point for increasing international concern over the persecution. The Baha'is have set up their own office as non-governmental members of the UN. They're involved in a variety of social and economic projects. The most pressing is monitoring and publicizing events in Iran.
Baha'i international community?
Their human rights representative is Gerald Knight.
Well, the situation is that for the last few years there's been intense persecution of the Baha'is, and it reached a peak with a lot of executions. The executions died down for the last several months, but just recently they seem to have begun again. We've had news of executions just in the last month. We believe that the intention of the authorities is to basically eliminate all traces of the Baha'i faith in the land of its birth. That may or may not mean killing all of them. Probably and hopefully it doesn't mean that, largely because of the international pressure that's being brought to bear.
Then we have seen reports of the execution of a further 6 Baha'i leaders. We would urge the Iranian authorities to review their policies and work to ensure that all their citizens can enjoy their human rights and in particular the inherent right to life and the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion.
Mr. Chairman, the fundamental question arises here as to why these few civilized Western governments are so eager to push their humanitarian effort through the so-called Baha'i issue against our popular government. What is the significance of this group for the Western community? Mr. Chairman, we believe in addition to the foregoing objectives of the nice and peace-loving Western government is their desire to help this political group propagate its doctrine wider and gain international recognition. And the most important of all, attack Islam. I reiterate our position that in the Islamic Republic of Iran, freedom, liberty, unity, and territorial integrity of the country are inseparable from one another, the preservation of which is the responsibility of the government and each individual of Iranian nation. No one is penalized for the mere possession of a certain set of beliefs, except those who actually engage in acts of espionage, conspiracy, and other activities contrary to the high interests of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
UN commissions on human rights have repeatedly rejected this explanation and condemned the persecution of Baha'is in Iran as religious. But what is the religious issue?
Well, it's very simple, because the definition of Islam as understood by the fanatics who are in power in Iran is that Baha'is, according to their own interpretation of Sharia law, are apostates who deserve to be killed. That doesn't mean to say that they would go ahead and kill all the Baha'is. They would prefer that, having made an example of the leadership, that the rest will be intimidated into denying their faith or ceasing to practice their faith, and thus the faith will basically die out. That is their intention, and this is because of theological differences. They believe that Muhammad was the last of the prophets. We believe that Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, was the latest, but not the last, of God's messengers who came to guide mankind. That's the difference.
If theological differences lie behind today's persecutions, how exactly did they arise? The Baha'i faith first appeared in Persia over 100 years ago. At the time, many Persian Muslims felt their religion had become corrupted. Some awaited the promised one who would appear to purify the faith. In the 1840s, a young Persian merchant, calling himself the Bab, announced that he was the promised one. He said Islam and the whole of society must be reformed by new spiritual and social teachings. His message was radical, even militant. Followers must prepare to shed their blood in order to convert the whole world to their cause. The Babi movement was not surprisingly seen as a threat by the authorities. 3,000 followers of the Bab were put to death, often after violent clashes with government troops. The Bab himself was imprisoned, charged with heresy, and in July 1850, shot. The Babi movement began to fade, with most of its leaders dead or sent into exile. But the Bab had said he was the herald of a greater one yet to come. In a Persian prison, one of his followers, Baha'u'llah, had a version that he was the new messenger of God. He said he was the promised one of all religions, the second coming of Christ, the Jewish Lord of hosts, the Mahdi awaited by the Muslims. He preached that all the great religions of the world are true. Their prophets brought different teachings to different ages. Now he, as the latest messenger from God, had a new message: peace and unity under one faith, the Baha'i faith. As Baha'u'llah's message spread, the authorities exiled him further and further away from Persia. He and his family were shunted around the Ottoman Empire, arriving finally in 1868 at the prison city of Akka on the west coast of Palestine. The prison still stands today. It's said Baha'u'llah's followers camped underneath these windows, waiting for a glimpse of their Messiah. Inside his cell, despite the harsh and cramped conditions, Baha'u'llah developed the principles of his new Baha'i religion. He set down a new code of laws and social teachings, which he said would transform mankind. Racial equality, the abolition of poverty, the creation of a universal language, and for the future, a Baha'i world government under one God. He sent letters to the kings and rulers of the earth, calling on them to set up an international tribunal to stop all wars. It's rumored Queen Victoria looked kindly on his message. No one replied. Baha'u'llah spent the last 20 years of his life in a mansion on the outskirts of Akka, having convinced his jailers that he and his teachings weren't a threat. Here he completed his writings, nearly 100 volumes of spiritual and social teachings, providing a foundation for the growth of the religion. He appointed his eldest son, Abdu'l-Baha, to lead the faith. Pilgrims from the West began to visit, attracted by this gentle, mystical religion and by this kindly man with his flowing white beard. Many thought he was Christ returned to earth. The interest was mutual. The West came to Abdu'l-Baha, and in 1911, Abdu'l-Baha decided to go to the West. It was a crucial step, for if the Baha'i faith was to be a world religion, it had to develop beyond its eastern roots. Abdu'l-Baha was the man for the job. He was charismatic but approachable. He simplified and adapted his father's teachings, and he emphasized the principles he knew would be attractive to liberal Westerners. Equality for women, no racial discrimination, education for all, an end to war. He spoke of a unified system of belief and government for the whole world, the Baha'i system.
Abdu'l-Baha came to Montreal. He stayed in our house in 1910, 1911, and 12, his voyages to the West. And I saw him when I was a baby, but I don't remember it, unfortunately. And this was a lifelong connection. Then I came here in 1923, and I met this young man who was the successor of his grandfather, Shoghi Effendi. And of course, to me, he was the head of my faith. And when I came here for my third pilgrimage, if you like, in 1937, he told me he was going to marry. I could have said no, but I didn't want to.
Shoghi Effendi was just 24 when he was made guardian of the faith. He lacked the charisma of his grandfather, but he had the skills needed to bring the faith into the 20th century.
He was an organizer, and quite a brilliant organizer, and he saw the necessity for religion in the modern age to be well administered, to be well organized, and, if you like, routinized. And so he began to emphasize things like the registration of Baha'i assemblies as limited companies in law. He began to see the importance of being legally recognized, that this would give Baha'ism status, and it would give it the, increasingly, the power to do things as an organized body. He got them working in committees, he got them working, consulting together, forming plans, holding conventions. And by doing that, he laid the foundation, very, very strong foundation, for the spread of Baha'ism from late 40s, 50s, and increasingly since then, into other areas of the globe.
One of my colleagues said that one of the most outstanding things about Shoghi Effendi was that he had done 100 years' work in 36 years of his ministry. And he died far too young. He was 60 when he died. And I think he died because he overworked so much. But the point is not that. The point is that everything that he started has fructified, has come to fulfillment so fast in the last 26 years that it's unbelievable. I think he'd be simply delighted.
From its beginnings as an offshoot of Islam, the Baha'i faith has spread throughout the world, first to the West and then to the Third World. But can it truly be called a world religion?
It's not a world religion like Christianity or Islam in the sense of having a great history or a civilization or a culture or a developed theology or all of those things that we associate with the world religion. But it is potentially a world religion in terms of its growth, its membership, and its spread.
Crawley, on the outskirts of London. An English family tea party on a summer's afternoon. The Prentice family embraces 4 generations of British Baha'is.
Well, I was a Baptist before Methodist. More of my life, I was a Baptist. And my mother, she went to Methodist, and I just accompanied her mostly.
I was Church of England for years and years, used to go most religiously to Sunday school. I mean, I was christened, I was confirmed, and I was married, all in Church of England. But I mean, it didn't mean anything to me.
Before I became a Baha'i, I was quite attracted to Buddhism and Christianity and many of them, and it was a conflict because I didn't know which one to choose. So by becoming a Baha'i, I can accept them all.
You don't have to choose. Tonight, the apprentices are taking part in a Baha'i meeting known as a fireside. Some neighbors have been invited along because firesides are the normal way of spreading the faith by gentle persuasion. Baha'is have no clergy and no churches. They're encouraged to discuss their faith, but not to question its essentials.
Do you have many rules and regulations, a lot of do's and don'ts like most religions appear to have?
Spiritual laws.
Baha'i teachings are infallible, and its principles are strictly kept. Daily prayer, fasting, no alcohol, gambling or gossiping, no involvement in politics.
We have the particular bounty of actually having the word of God, the word of Baha'u'llah, in at least 100 volumes.
Chicago, Illinois. An extraordinary landmark looms over the suburbs of Wilmette. An architectural hybrid, part Taj Mahal, part Gothic cathedral. Carefully designed for peace of mind. It's a place of pilgrimage, a place of meditation, and it's a must for all tourists north of Chicago. But what exactly is it?
This building is a house of worship of the Baha'i faith. It is not a congregational gathering place for Baha'is. It was constructed by Baha'is as a gift to humanity, a place for anyone to come for prayer and meditation, because Baha'is believe that all of the religions come from the one same God, and Baha'is believe that it's God's intention that man in this day achieve the oneness and unity of the human race. Public interest has increased, particularly since the persecution of the Baha'is in Iran. It used to be that people would come to look at the building, ask a couple of questions, thank us, and leave. Now more and more people are really wanting to know about the Baha'i faith, and they're wanting to know about the Baha'i view of the future and what the Baha'i faith has to offer humanity.
The early American Baha'is built their house of worship over a period of 40 years. They had to stop every time they ran out of money. During that time, this tiny wooden office was the national center for the whole of the United States. Today, the Baha'i National Center is a little more impressive.
I think the fact that we're in this building is significant because it shows that we've grown considerably. If you've seen the building where we used to be, which is a very small building at the foot of the house of worship, and compared to this, it means we have really come a long way. It seems like there's a new spirit abroad, not only here, but around the world. And people are beginning to take notice of the Baha'is.
The Baha'is have learned that getting noticed means getting organized, and organization is something they're taking seriously. Their offices in Chicago control a network of Baha'i groups and activities across the country, setting up conferences and teaching programs, printing and distributing literature, and enrolling new members. They've commandeered today's technology to serve their vision of the future.
Well, according to the Baha'i writings, eventually America is destined to become the spiritual leader of mankind. And this doesn't mean the material. So this is a whole new world for, as far as we are concerned, for Americans.
For American Baha'is, this new world in which they will be spiritual leaders is a future dream. But in Haifa, Israel, it's already under construction.
This is the world headquarters of the Baha'i faith. It's the Baha'i World Center, which encompasses both the administrative and the spiritual center of the Baha'i religion, the Baha'i world community. This particular building houses the chamber of the Universal House of Justice, which is the highest administrative institution of the Baha'i faith.
The style and the surroundings of the world headquarters are grandiose, but so is the dream that inspired them.
I think the Universal House of Justice will play a very great role in developing peace in the future, because we believe that the models that we are developing, these Baha'i societies, on the local and national level, will be used by the world, by the nation, by the peoples, and will be able to offer a working model for a new community.
Baha'is believe the world is on the verge of collapse. But as mankind teeters on the edge, it will cry out for help, and the Baha'is, with their models of communities and world government, will come to the rescue. They're building Noah's Ark for when the flood comes. Computers installed in the basement will soon be capable of instant communication with Baha'i centers around the globe. To make the dream credible, they need as many members as they can get, and recruitment is a priority, especially in the third world. According to Baha'i figures, membership in India alone has risen from 900 to almost 1 million in 20 years.
We're growing at such a rapid rate in all the particularly third world countries, where Baha'i populations in some countries now constitute already 1% of the population. There are areas where literacy is a problem. So the Baha'is have established already 5 educational and cultural radio stations. We think this is terribly significant.
In Hemingway, South Carolina, the education takes a more subtle form, with an easy blend of popular music and public service messages.
One heart at a time. Radio Bahai, WLGI.
Radio Bahai in South Carolina was put here because this is where the largest concentration of Baha'is is in the United States. There are more than 10,000 Baha'is within the greater broadcast region of the radio station.
After 5 years working in the third world, Kurt Heim has seen how effective radio can be in spreading the word of Baha'u'llah to the poor and uneducated.
We are the 5th Baha'i radio station in the world. Here in North America, we're the first station. There are already stations existing in Latin America. But the purpose of the stations primarily is to serve as a tool to assist people in general. For instance, the elimination of racial prejudice, the establishment of the equality of men and women. These are principles that the radio station serves, which we see as being basically secular, if you will. They derive from spiritual principles of all the religions, but they aren't uniquely Baha'i. They are service to mankind.
Uniting the world one heart at a time. This is Radio Bahai, WLGI.
Our primary role is to create a sense of what the spirit of the faith is about, so that people, whether they choose to become Baha'is or not, will at least be our friends, and will recognize that the goal and objective of a Baha'i radio station is to serve all people.
It is a Baha'i radio station. It is Radio Bahai, WLGI, 90.9 on your FM dial. So we very much intend to share the Baha'i message over the radio. But the Baha'i message is can be communicated in many different ways.
Dr. Roy Jones is a happy man. This former black activist of the 60s has just taken over the Louis Gregory Institute, set up 15 years ago as a teaching center to spread the Baha'i message among the local population. Dr. Jones claims 1,700 converts in the last 2 months, and he plans for another 20,000 by next year.
We have experienced back in between 65 and 70 a growth pattern that was phenomenal, in which the Baha'i faith seemed to have appealed to the rural, southern black population. And now in 85, we're experiencing a great growth in the adherence of the Baha'i faith. So again, the message is reaching the population. It's a message that touches hearts, and people in South Carolina are heartfelt people. They're folksy people, they're friendly people. And the message penetrates hearts.
I wouldn't be more happy today if I had $1 million. I wouldn't even know what to do with it. you know, as long as you let me have the faith. I do believe.
At a Baha'i feast, Mary Beckman sings her faith. Old-time gospel tunes are on the program, but new-time Baha'i words provide the message.
That the Baha died for me, and without... To me, being a Baha'i is the most beautiful thing I have never even dreamed this could happen. I have a more clear understanding about Jesus Christ, about all the prophets of God, whereas before I only just tuned in on Jesus Christ. That's all I know about. But now I know more about the others.
Mary and many others are obviously enthused about a religion that claims to welcome different styles, cultures, and existing faiths.
I was a Methodist. I was a Baptist too. I feel that the time is right because everybody is searching for something and everybody's looking for something. And I think the Baha'i faith is what they're looking for because they didn't try everything else. And it hasn't worked. People have been sitting back and they've been waiting. They've been going to churches. They were going to conventions, looking for this spiritual revival, and they haven't found it. And in the Baha'i faith, they found it.
We have not purposefully attempted to convert, using your term, members of church congregations with the intent of upsetting those congregations. I've lived in different parts of the United States, the Northeast, the Midwest, the South, and I think the message here is certainly given more directly. When you got a kind of an army mobilized with unity of thought, unity of purpose, unity of action, it has an effect.
I've been doing what we call mass teaching for about 15 years. In fact, this institute was created because of mass teaching. The people who live in this state, in this part of the state, have no other access to finding out about this faith. So it simply means that the Baha'is have to make a special effort, have to give these people a special measure of love to go out and walk these roads and simply tell them that the messenger of God for whom they wait has in fact come.
At first I was a little scared, but after the first two houses, when I saw the people's personalities and characters, I really felt at home around here. And it was very easy.
Like, it's different for me. Because most people don't even want to listen at school. But I mean, out here, people are really interested and they really want to hear about it.
This method of mass teaching may be new to the visiting students from the north, but it's as old as revivalism for the population of the south. There might be nothing disturbing about Baha'izing door to door if it weren't for a fundamental rule of the faith, that Baha'is are never to proselytize.
One of the things that should be clear is that we do not force this faith on anybody. We welcome people to hear, to understand, to become a part of, the faith. We don't advertise it. It's a people-to-people process.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
All right, how are you?
Hi. We're members of the Baha'i faith, and we believe in the unification of the whole world, and we'd like to share a message with you here today. The first thing I want to show you is that Baha'is live all over the world. God sent different prophets down to mankind to teach him how to live better. He sent Abraham.
It is a very direct approach. We believe that people are open to the message here in a way that they're not open in many other places. So that when we mention, the Baha'i faith, that there's a natural curiosity for people to want to know more. So once we mention it, people ask us the questions. The product is one that we believe that can contribute to the betterment of the community, the betterment of mankind, and we certainly have no problem sharing that product. It just seems to happen here differently, and so the approach here is different, the style is different, the culture is different.
The Universal House of Justice wields absolute authority on all questions of faith. It accepts that an emerging world religion must adapt its style that it meets with different cultures. But what about problems that arise from those central tenets of faith that can't be adapted? Problems that may undermine its credibility as a world religion. This is the Baha'i version of their teaching that all religions are one.
It is another article of the Baha'i faith that all revealed religions are but different stages of the same faith of God, progressively proclaimed by such educators of humanity as Moses, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Muhammad, and now the Bab and Baha'u'llah.
The Baha'i learns to love and respect Muhammad. I'm sorry to say not what we see from his followers today, but what we see in his life, if we study it, and in his book, the Quran, which is a very wonderful book. The Jew accepts Jesus. The whole bunch of them, so to speak, have to accept the fact that Krishna brought a divine illumination to the world. That if we were so pig-headed, so stupid, so selfish, so asleep at the switch, that the only way we are going to get rid of war and go forward into the future and create a world civilization and abolish war is by being pretty well beat up somewhere along the line, you see. Then we will have to do it. And then comes the glorious future, because you get rid of war once and for all.
We have never experienced peace on this planet. We have never known what peace is. Baha'is believe that once peace has been established, that it itself will generate a momentum that can never be reversed. Once people begin to gain the benefits, Abdu'l-Baha, the son of the founder of the faith, speaking at a conference in the United States in 1912, said to them, "You have had war for thousands of years. Why don't you try peace for a change? If you don't like it, you can always go back to war." But obviously, once we have tried peace, we will never go back to war. We will never allow this to occur again.
After the world is at peace, Baha'is believe there will be an inevitable move towards the creation of a new kind of government, the Baha'i world order.
A world federal system will rule the entire planet and exercise unchallengeable authority. A world executive, backed by an international force, will carry out the decisions arrived at and will protect the organic unity of the whole Commonwealth. A world tribunal will adjudicate and deliver its compulsory and final verdicts in all and any disputes that may arise between the various elements constituting this universal system. It will be a system in which force is made the servant of justice, whose life is sustained by its universal recognition of one God and its allegiance to one common revelation. Such is the goal towards which humanity, impelled by the unifying forces of life, is moving.
This is the ultimate goal of the Baha'is, is to create a one religion, one state, one order system for the future. It's to be known as the Baha'i world.
You are a hippie or whatever you want to be. Why not? You're free. Can't coerce people. You can entice them. You can educate them. You can reason with them. But we don't believe in bludgeoning people to believe the way we do. That would be the exact antithesis of creating unity in the world, wouldn't it?
It's clear that if the Baha'is want to be taken seriously as a world religion, they have a number of problems to sort out. But for the moment, their present-day problems are rather more pressing.
It looks as though, unfortunately, we are moving now into another phase of the persecution. Executions have started again after being frightened off, I guess, by the publicity and the attention at the Human Rights Commission. And it looks like we're into another dark patch in the immediate future, I'm afraid.
I somehow feel that there is no possibility that the Iranian authorities are going to change their position, their deeply held conviction that they have to eliminate the Baha'is. I don't think they're going to change, and therefore it must continue as long as we have the kind of government that exists in Iran at the moment. I think that things can very easily be forgotten in today's world, and there are so many things, so many problems. The Baha'i persecution in Iran is one example. It's not the most dramatic, but it is a very good example of man's inhumanity to man because it is so clear-cut. It is so obvious. There are no political overtones to it. It is a purely religious question, and as such, I think it merits staying in the center of attention as long as the problem continues. And I think that it will, because I don't think it's going to go away.
Now on 4, the doctrines of the Baha'i faith are questioned by James Mackey in order to find their philosophy when calling on the gods of war.
It is difficult indeed to find a faith whose God was never thought to condone resort to armed violence. But in the Baha'i faith, Pathway to Peace, we find it written, Baha'is are forbidden to use violence or force. Is this an absolute prohibition? Is this the faith whose God is never the God of war? To answer these and other questions, I have invited Charles MacDonald, who is Secretary General of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United Kingdom. Charles MacDonald, in view of the suspicion that religions are by nature divisive, and therefore contribute to the divisions and hostilities of this already divided and belligerent race, can you tell me what is the Baha'i view of other and older religions?
Well, we think essentially religion is one, that indeed religion has been the greatest unifying force in history, and at the inception of each religious dispensation, it has been characterized by this uniting people, bringing them together in harmony. It's only when a religion decays and breaks into fragments, breaks into sects, that human perversity reasserts itself, and divisions and conflict come. But we do believe that the one unifying force in the world from the very beginning has been religion.
I see. And the founding of the Baha'i faith in the last century, was it God's way of healing the divisions which had grown up
in the older faith. Is that a correct understanding of your? Well, this is certainly our understanding, but again, we believe that religion is progressive and unfolding, and that the Baha'i revelation is the latest chapter in this unfolding story. It has come at this particular critical stage in world history when the last great step in a process of social evolution can be taken. That is to say, having attained the unity of family, tribe, city-state, nation-state, the approach now is to world federalism. And we believe that the function of the Baha'i faith in the world, the mission of the founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, is indeed to destroy the barriers between the peoples of the world and effect complete reconciliation. Now, thanks to your sending me some works of the Baha'u'llah. In fact, I read in the introduction to the Most Holy Book that he himself was expected to be the one who would introduce the kingdom of God. And in the Most Holy Book itself, I find it claimed that here you have the basic principles for the future world order, the basic laws. In addition, the Holy Book, in fact, names the one who will be the authoritative interpreter of these laws, and in fact, the institution which will preserve both the interpretation and the laws themselves for at least 1,000 years. So that the divine revelation, in effect, has, if I could put it non-facetiously, sewn things up rather tightly, at least for the next 1,000 years. Is that a fair impression? Well, not entirely, because the administrative institution, which is given authority by Baha'u'llah, which is called the Universal House of Justice, is empowered to legislate for those matters which are not expressly given in the book, and also to repeal its own laws. So in accordance with the needs of the age, the House of Justice can legislate. But the basic laws of Baha'u'llah himself will remain in force throughout the dispensation. I see. And the prohibition which is expressed in your books, in the Divine Revelation itself, the prohibition against coming forward with any other claims to revelation for at least 1,000 years, this means that for that length of time, these particular basic rules for a future world order are set. Yes, we believe that each of the great revealers of religion has presided over a dispensation, and he has been, in a real sense, the Lord of the age, and that his laws must prevail throughout that dispensation until another one appears. We call them manifestations of God, who then does what he judges to be right for his age and dispensation. Yes. It strikes me a little bit like the Roman Catholic Church, to which I belong, in the sense that it has a revelation, it has an authoritative interpreter, who is the Pope, and it is the institution which preserves interpretation and laws. You didn't perhaps have a sneak preview of another religion before modeling yours? No, I think that there are some basic differences, inasmuch as the Baha'i revelation, the words of Baha'u'llah, are written down indisputably, either with his own signature or with his seal. And that the one whom he appointed as his successor and interpreter, as the Roman Catholic Church would say Peter was the successor of Christ, again, that this is unequivocal, cannot be disputed, because it's in his own writing in his will and testament. And that therefore the writings of Baha'u'llah and the writings of Abdu'l-Baha, his son, constitute unchallengeable Baha'i scripture. I see. I should like to ask you, in particular, although briefly, about your relationships with one religion, that is Islam, because your founder did, in fact, come from that background. Now, I'd like to ask you that question in the context of some rather savage persecution of your people in Iran. Both the minorities' rights group and Amnesty International have indeed verified that this goes on. And if we could pause for a moment just to look at a shot that will make this clear to us.
They tied me to a bed. and then they beat the soles of my feet. I can't remember that after how many lashes, but I think maybe after 25 or 30 lashes, I didn't feel anything and I became unconscious. Then again, when I came in, they started beating me again. And when they were beating me, they were asking me to become Muslim.
Yes, this is an unfortunate side of religion, the aspect of persecution, which is really found in all religions, not least Christianity. But certainly in Islam, from the very beginning of the Baha'i faith, it dates from 1844, the authorities have persecuted this faith. It has come in waves, and this present regime has intensified the persecution. Quite a large number of Baha'is are in prison under extreme pressure, torture, to recant their faith.
There is no way in which anybody could condone such activity, of course. But the broader area of your relationship with Islam was what I meant to hang upon this rather crucial peg. I did read that your guardian of the faith, as you call Shoghi Effendi, did in fact, I mean, apart from saying some fairly rough things, I would imagine, about the Shiite clergy, such as that they were perfidious and that they were a horde of somewhat, the exact words were actually degraded priests. The point I want to get is that he did describe Islam as an outworn creed. He seemed to suggest that there was nothing left in it anymore. It was just obsolete, simply.
No, I don't think he quite implied that. Outworn in one sense, that it was relevant to the needs of a particular age and dispensation, and that now, just as you would appreciate coming from, shall we say, secondary school to university, there are new dimensions and new needs, new requirements, and that change and progression is needed. But certainly the Baha'i faith has grown out of Shia Islam and upholds the divine station of Muhammad as a prophet of God.
While in a sense replacing the Sharia, that is the law according to Islam, with its own set of rules for the future world order.
Yes, those laws are applicable during a dispensation, but the new prophet has the authority and the power to bring in new laws which are related to the needs of a particular age, and clearly the needs of the modern world, a world of complete interdependence of nations, are different from the needs of medieval Arabia.
Is there something equivalent here, perhaps, to the way in which Christians have too often talked about the Jewish faith, I mean, the Old Testament? The name itself suggests that it's now obsolete, has been pretty well replaced by the New Testament, the New Covenant.
Exactly.
I see. I'm not sure how either Jews facing Christians or Muslims facing Baha'is would like that, but that's a fair comparison, isn't it?
I might say that there is an essential element of religion which is never obsolete, which is the law of love. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Which Christ said are the two that sum up the law and the prophets. That these are restated, perhaps amplified, but they're eternal.
And set in the context of a law which is now more apposite to the present age than the laws in which either Judaism or Christianity, in effect, try to legislate for the past. Now, let me come on to the Baha'i community as it presently exists in the world. You do, although you don't proselytize, you do, of course, spread the knowledge of the faith and recruit people to your community, and you organize around a universal house of justice in Haifa, in Israel. Could we again just look at a shot of that house of justice and a comment on it before going on?
This particular building houses the chamber of the Universal House of Justice, which is the highest administrative institution of the Baha'i faith.
The style and the surroundings of the world headquarters are grandiose, but so is the dream that inspired them.
I think the Universal House of Justice will play a very great role in developing peace
in the future, because we believe that the models that we are developing, these Baha'i societies, in the local and national level, will be used by the world, by the nation, by the peoples, and will be able to offer a working model for a new community.
Yes, this is, of course, a very special place in the Baha'i world. It is the seat of our supreme body, the Universal House of Justice, which is on Mount Carmel in Israel. And the Baha'i faith, you know, has no clergy. It is governed by elected institutions at local level, at national level, and at international level. And these are elected by free universal suffrage without nomination or canvassing. The world body is re-elected each 5 years, and the electorate are the members of the national Baha'i assemblies. There are now 149 national Baha'i assemblies in the world.
Now, what I want to ask you about is the relationship between this Baha'i community, so organized with this institution, to the nations and to the future unified society of the race. On one hand, I see you proposing that this is a model community, that is something to be imitated. On the other hand, I wonder if it's simply that. I wonder if it's just that you will expect the nations at some stage to make a pact, as I think one of your writings suggests, of their own free will, as it were, looking at that model, and that, as it were, would be enough for you. On the other hand, I see that you are talking about a kingdom of God, you are talking about revealed basic rules for the future order of society, and that part of it gives me the impression of a theocracy, so that in a way the future society exists, at least in a form, and we're all to join it. Which is it?
Well, there are actually both. There are two stages of this process. The first, it's referred to in the writings of Baha'u'llah as the lesser peace, which he indicates will come into existence in this century. This has nothing to do with the Baha'is directly, but is merely the pressure of events on the nations will compel them to recognize that it is impossible to organize the affairs of the world on the basis of unfettered national sovereignty, and that some form of world federalism must be established. And this is a lesser peace. And we believe the spirit of the age is impelling mankind towards this. The second is he calls the most great peace, which we would equate with the kingdom of God on earth, which is many centuries ahead, when we believe that the generality of mankind will have recognized Baha'u'llah as the promised one of all faiths. In that sense, it is a theocracy. The government shall be upon his shoulders.
And in that greater peace, the governmental institution which you are now developing, that will be itself, will it, the government of the united race, of the United Nations?
Yes, we believe that, but not by being imposed, but by being universally accepted.
They'll come to see it for what
Yes.
it is, and will see
There is a statement by the late guardian of the Baha'i faith that this Universal House of Justice, which in his lifetime didn't exist, will come to be recognized as the last refuge of a tottering civilization.
I see. Now, may I finally come to the crucial issue of the use of arms and the image of the god of war. As I understand it, from again the writings you sent me and which I read, when this great pact, in fact, takes place, then the individual nations will be allowed to keep only enough arms for internal law and order. They will cede the right to make war to the supreme government, as it were, of the world, and it, or its supreme tribunal, I think I read that phrase, will in fact act as judge and executioner, so that any nation or group who in the future might wish to break the pact would in fact be forced, in effect, to restore it or crushed. Is that a correct understanding of the use of arms?
When you say, yes, judge and execute, I mean, we see a legislature and an executive as two separate parts just as we have them nationally, we'll have them internationally. And certainly, yes, we believe there must be a period of collective security in which a supranational authority will be sufficiently strong to deter any aggressor. And this will precede general disarmament and world peace, but maintaining sufficient arms to preserve internal order.
Now, are we talking about the lesser peace?
The lesser peace, yes.
In the lesser peace, who is the aggressor to be if you have a single world order?
No, I mean, I'm talking about you have it's possible that one nation may be recalcitrant or may decide they don't like this world authority.
Even in the lesser peace?
Even at the beginning of the lesser peace, yes.
And in that case, the government of the world authority
would take remedial action.
I see. Yeah. Could I just read from the promise of world peace for you what Shoghi Effendi says about this? The fundamental principle underlying this solemn pact should be so fixed that if any government later violate any one of its provisions, all the governments on earth should arise to reduce it to utter submission. Nay, the human race as a whole should resolve with every power at its disposal to destroy that government. Now that is for recalcitrant nations in the course of the lesser peace who would in fact try to break the pact.
I think this is comparable to a situation in any nation, that a government must has the duty to preserve law and order within the confines of a nation, and must obviously be very firm with any violator. Equally, a supranational government must have the same attitude to any body whatsoever in the world which could violate that peace.
And will the same right to wield arms, at least by the supreme authority, be present in the great peace? Or will there be any change then?
There will be a change, a fundamental change, because the great peace, which is perhaps many centuries ahead, will derive from the spiritual regeneration of the generality of mankind, to this extent that it will be the fulfillment of the prophecies that the law of God, the knowledge of God will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. It will be a collective change of heart, and the principle of the oneness of mankind will progressively remove enmity and hatred from the hearts of a growing host of people, so that the kind of world that it's a new creation, it's something that we've never experienced.
And in that new creation, there will be no resort to armed violence at all?
I don't think so. If the generality of mankind is imbued with the principle of the oneness of mankind, then people will believe that to hurt someone else is to hurt themselves. They'll have an empathy for everyone.
I see. The dilemma, it seems to me, is that you seem to envisage a kingdom of God. We're used to the phrase in Christianity, coming about but not yet. And furthermore, you're looking to it to come about by the use of something, namely armed violence, which it will then itself repudiate.
Not by the use of it. I mean, the use of armed violence is never advocated, but the use of preventive measures to resist armed violence is there. In other words, collective security, preceding general disarmament and world peace. And then peace will be an evolving concept. It will be a new creation. It will be something. This is the knowledge of God will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. I will put my law in their inmost parts. It's a new creation. It's something different than anything man has experienced.
Yes, but the use of arms is legal and indeed endorsed here to crush recalcitrant governments in the course of the lesser peace.
This is during the lesser peace.
Yes, I mean, it's just in that sense that I say you use arms to bring about a condition in which they will no longer be necessary.
But arms in a preventative way, not as an aggressive thing in itself, Certainly arms will be used. We believe in collective security. We're not pacifists in as much as we say there is never a situation when arms cannot be used. We believe in the principle of collective security.
And so the God of the Baha'is is a God of war if it's unfortunately necessary during the Lesser Peace.
I think that's overstating it. We believe that society has always had the duty of protecting itself. And if society is advanced to a world dimension, then the problem of protecting itself against the aggressor is a greater thing than ever. But society has always had this right that the authority should resist the aggressor.
Yes, of course, and it's only when God does finally manage to sow his peace in all our hearts, which won't be for a while yet.
That will be what we call the most great peace.
That we will be able to entirely refuse the use of arms.
Well, man will have repudiated that. It will be a new creation. It will be an age when the knowledge of God will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea.
Charles MacDonald, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, next week it's the turn of the humanists to explain why they feel religions to be divisive and aggressive in Gods of War next Saturday evening at 7. The gods of India have been beautifully depicted in native art forms, many of which have found their way to British collections. The Victoria and Albert Museum has great numbers of these treasures, but only a tiny proportion of them on...
If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
All down the ages, the human race has succeeded in tearing its world apart, turning nation against nation, race against race, and one religion against another. But there is a faith who believes that world peace is not only possible, but inevitable. This faith is the world's youngest religion, the Baha'i faith. There are currently some 5.5 million Baha'is in all corners of the globe, working towards a lasting peace in which the earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. So don't blow it. Good planets are hard to find.
the most widespread religion in the world after Christianity. But being a Baha'i isn't easy. The message of Baha'u'llah meant so much to Mona, a 16-year-old girl in Iran, that she was willing to die.
Living in a land so cruel, she said, this is where I've got to be. Taken in the night, her heart full of light, this is where I've got to be. How can I tell you, how could she be so young to know the truth in all the trees? To stand before them, hear them say, save your life and throw your faith away. Run with the children, send your love to me, send your love around the world. Our souls go dancing. Run with the children, you gave your life, gave your love around the world. We'll go dancing.
The search for freedom is an absolute, but the way that you get there is relative. That every person gets there in their own way, and I think that religion is the same thing. Religion is an absolute, but for every person and for every kind of person and for every race and color and culture, there are different ways of approaching this whole idea. And I think all of that is encapsulated in the Baha'i teachings and in the Baha'i faith. The world really is at a point where we need to come together as a whole. We need to overcome the differences between people and the difficulties between different cultures, different races, different religions, because religion in so many cases has become a divisive force between people. And so for me, being a Baha'i is really wrapped up in that whole idea, the idea of oneness, and the idea of bringing the world together and saving the world, because at this point, what we're faced with is the destruction of the world, the destruction of our planet, and each of us in our own way has to really contribute to that.
For too long, mankind has worshipped the very things that tear mankind apart. But there is one religion who believes it's time to think again. That religion is the Baha'i faith. What are we aiming for? An end to extreme wealth and poverty. An end to all wars. Respect for the resources of our planet and its atmosphere. An end to the misuse of drugs and drink. An end to the inequality between men and women. But if the Baha'is succeed in taking all these away, what have you got left? In a word, peace. And isn't that the one thing that's really worth having?
The vision of the Baha'i faith is ultimately the most great peace. That's what we're working towards, that's what we're committed to, that's what we put into practice, starting with ourselves.
So when is that going to happen? When is this world peace going to materialize?
That depends on us.
Were you brought up as a Baha'i, or were you converted? Did you find it?
Well, it's very important that each person who is a Baha'i has found it for themselves. You don't just automatically become a Baha'i. But actually, I was brought up in a Baha'i family, and actually I'm fourth generation Baha'i.
So doesn't that make a difference when you brought up as a Baha'i person?
Of course it makes a difference.
Right.
I mean, I have no idea what it would be like.
So you've stuck with the religion, and haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Yes. Have you questioned your religion at all at any stage in your life? Question it all the time. I think if you stop questioning, you just become apathetic and you just become blind.
Surely the gods didn't convert you into Baha'i. It was your family. You were conditioned into it.
Well, I really don't think so. I think that when a human soul recognizes its creator...
What is this human soul? Can you explain it?
Well, it's very difficult because the soul is a mystery. All religions have taught that the soul is a mystery. We can't understand it. I think that the soul is our reality. It's the real essence of who each one of us is. It's not our body, it's our soul. And the reality of that manifests itself by spiritual qualities, okay, which might be love or justice or your honesty, or your integrity, or your trustworthiness, or whatever. Those are your qualities, which are the manifestations of your spiritual reality.
What do you do? I mean, you talk about God, but I mean, you talk mainly about this as a very ethereal substance, which is up
God
here.
is
but
beyond.
Who is God?
Okay.
I mean,
I'm getting to answer that question. Actually, it's a very good question. I think it might deal with some other questions. But first of all, I once had a friend who came to my room in college, and she said, Adam, I believe everything in the Baha'i faith. It all makes such sense, but I don't believe in God. She said, and don't get me wrong, I do believe in a life force. I believe that there is a power in this universe greater than man. I believe there is a reality, a something. I don't know how to describe it. That was about as close to God as I have ever heard. But she said, I don't believe in God. But don't get me wrong, I do believe in this life force, this power that sustains, animates all of creation.
Your concept of God then is really a force instead of a person.
It's definitely not a person, but we can't know God because God is infinite, is unknowable. All of the religions taught that.
If God is unknowable, how do we know him? How are you going to possibly bring about this utopia of world peace which you talk about in your literature states?
First of all, in order for God to be known, we know that throughout history, every 1,000 years or so, there have been messengers from God, prophets, messengers, manifestations of God, however you want. I'm not interested in the word.
Can I say something? If God is unknowable, how do these prophets get in touch with God?
Right. Through a beautiful, amazing, we can't really understand the process of God speaking through his messenger, through his prophet, through his mouthpiece, which might be Jesus, which might before that have been Moses, which might before that have been Buddha or Krishna. All of
You're
these
not contradicting yourself here when you're saying God is unknowable and yet we have these wonderful prophets down through the ages.
How do you know who's a prophet and who isn't a prophet in that case?
I'm just going to finish here. As a grace, as a gift to humanity, we have had these divine educators who have come to give us the religions of the world.
So when I was just asking about, Baha'u'llah, where did he actually get these scripts from? His whole notion, where did he actually originate from, all the scriptures? Because it says it's a circle, doesn't it? A circle of us believing Krishna, Muhammad. Did he use the scriptures from those religions?
Baha'u'llah was brought up in Iran, at that time it was called Persia, in the 19th century. He was imprisoned for his teachings because they were seen to be very radical. Baha'u'llah in the middle of the 19th century.
Radical? What was radical about?
Equality of men and women. In Iran in the 19th century, try that for radical. The unity of religions, that all religions come from the same God, that is radical.
So that makes him a prophet, being radical?
No.
But every prophet would know that, wouldn't they? It seems to me he just wrote a few really nice letters to a few world premiers, proclaimed himself a prophet and seems to have got a following.
When I was 16 years old, I got information on the Bahai faith, and I thought, what nice people. Look at the way they live, that's good. Maybe I want to be a Bahai. But then I realized that I liked the lifestyle, but I didn't believe, I didn't know this man. The faith wasn't there, though I agree with the way that you may live.
Great. I think that really the challenge to all of us, to Baha'is or not, it doesn't matter, is that in the middle of the last century something happened. Baha'u'llah appeared on this planet, Now, who is this man? Where do his teachings come from? We have to study that. We have to study that. What I am doing is going home and becoming part of a groundswell of young people in this country and on this continent coming together and studying this man. Studying who Baha'u'llah
What do you have to say about he was a prophet? What is it about him that made him a prophet?
Look at the fruit and then tell me if the tree is good. Because if the fruits are good, and this is what Jesus Christ said.
Well, we're not talking about fruit.
I'm sorry. The fruits that I'm referring to might be, look at his life, look at his teachings, look at the Baha'i community.
How do you actually differentiate yourself from other religions?
The Baha'i faith is an independent world religion because it has come from Baha'u'llah.
There are other religions, there's a world of other religions.
You know, I think it's very difficult to see the Baha'i faith as a new religion, because it's not that.
Well, you said earlier that it is a new religion. It's a very young, new religion.
It's a world religion, okay? It is a new chapter in this progressive revelation, the progressive unfoldment of God's teaching.
Surely is progressive chapter for you and the progressive chapter for other religions, and if we put it in a different way, perhaps you can answer.
So maybe a religion will come after that.
But I'm just going to get one question at a time, I think, Paul's question. What's the difference between the Baha'i faith and the other religions?
Right, yeah.
Okay. I think that we have, because I described earlier, that like humanity, Baha'is believe that humanity has developed to the point where Baha'u'llah says we are now at that stage, which is like that stage of coming out of our turbulent adolescence, and we have at the point where we are able to reach our maturity. Now, by maturity, Baha'u'llah says the meaning of this, the sign of this, is that once at last mankind is going to recognize its unity.
Well, when do you think when is maturity going to happen?
Well, I think
when do we come of age?
Look around in the world now. We are recognizing slowly by slowly that this is one world. We are all in it together, whether you like it or not. And the oneness of mankind, which a few hundred years ago would not have been understood, is now becoming a logic.
There's so many religions have said that.
That's one world. Excuse me, nobody has said that before.
I think they have. Every religion says we're equal. Every religion says that. I mean, it doesn't make yours different at all.
If Jesus Christ had said that the earth...
Well, I'm not talking about Jesus Christ as well.
If Jesus Christ said that the earth is but one country and mankind is citizens, at that time Australia was not discovered, at that time America was not discovered. The concept of the world 2,000 years ago was very different from the concept of the world today.
That's proposed to bring about this world peace. I mean, you used to talk about the unification of all religions. I mean, how are you going to bring it about? I mean, to me, you seem to be wonderful on the ethereal, on the philosophical, on this wonderful ideology of the utopias, but there's no practical sort of steps that you are taking that is going to achieve this. I mean, how are you going to
say one thing that I think, I hope, and there are many answers to that question, but look at the international Baha'i community. There may only be 5 million people, but from every background, every race, every class, every creed, in every country of the world, and united. After 140 years, there is one Baha'i faith.
In this one model.
Okay? This is a global community.
There's one Christian faith,
There's 3,000 denominations of Christianity.
And there's one Islamic faith.
How many denominations of Islam are there killing each other? Don't tell me that. If you look at the standard of being a Baha'i, it takes guts to be a Baha'i. You've got to be prepared to do it. You've got to say, I'm not just going to sit around, I want to make something, I want to become a better person. That's what it's about, okay? And that requires a decision to take your life and to align it, to bring it into parallel with the will of God, which we see from the right.
What does that mean in practical terms for people? I mean, there's this strict, this moral highness, this moral code that you've talked about. How does that affect people in their everyday life? What can they do and what can't they do as a Baha'i? Can they have an abortion?
Yes.
Can they have sex outside marriage?
You know, if I can just say, because, look, we are not, the Baha'i faith is not, don't ever think that the Baha'i faith is just a whole bunch of rules and regulations. No.
It doesn't seem anything though. Can I just say that?
You talked about regulation, and I'm trying to get from you exactly what that means.
Well, if I can just answer your question then, okay? This is quite difficult, there's lots of questions at once. In many regards, for instance, telling a lie, for Baha'is, that is as bad, I mean, it is really bad. Baha'u'llah equates it even to murder. I mean, that is how awful. And backbiting, what we call gossip, which was rampant in our daily life. Baha'is are told we must not gossip.
What do you mean by gossip?
What do you mean about other people behind their back?
How do you define it? Now you know. It's part of life anyway. We don't go and talk about
What if there was a religion behind somebody's back?
I talk about
pushing your religion.
You know, I said at the beginning.
things in the world than gossip.
I said at the beginning that Baha'is feel that prejudice is extremely dangerous.
I'm very interested in your policy about Baha'i people believe that it's okay for a black
little baby or whatever to be looked after by white parents. Well, I don't really agree with that. I don't think it's... I really don't... I don't see...
Why?
Well, can you tell me more about it? Why do you think this? Why do you think it's okay?
Baha'is believe, because Baha'u'llah has said that the earth is one country and mankind is citizens.
Right.
He says, regard you one another not as strangers, but as the family of humanity, okay? So for Baha'is, we don't... Colour is not, doesn't matter. We are actually our colours.
It shouldn't matter, but it does. It does. And there's nothing you can do to get away from it. I mean,
actually, I'm sorry, when I say that, it does matter, because if there was no colour, okay, if we were all white, or if we were all black, it would be like a garden in which all the flowers were white carnations, all the flowers. Actually, all the differences make the beauty. For Baha'is, the unity of the races is so important, the oneness of mankind. I mean, if you forget everything else that I say to you tonight, please remember unity, because that's what the Baha'i faith is about. Everything comes secondary to that. The unity of mankind is the central teaching. We believe in it, we will give our lives for it, okay? We believe that black and white must recognize each other as flowers in the same garden.
Yes,
and that's why...
You
convince me how this is going to come about.
It's not something you can apply to today's society. You couldn't apply that to England.
I'm just going to ask Greg something, okay, in response to what you said. The first black and white interracial marriage in the U.S. was a Baha'i marriage.
Great.
It's a fruit. Come on, be fair.
Fine, no problem.
I have lived for 20 years in Africa, okay?
Yeah.
I believe very much that when my parents went out to Kenya as Baha'is, okay, that they were demonstrating, as any, not just my parents, but any Baha'is from this country who go there, are demonstrating that we are committed to living together and working together to build this world.
Yeah.
Okay? It's not just talk.
Are you a pacifist then?
No!
You're not, but you're for world peace, and you're not a pacifist.
Baha'is are activists.
If you revolutionary.
Yes, we are spiritual revolutionaries. Absolutely.
Well, that's fine.
Could you fight for your belief?
Pacifists and activists is very important. I think that pacifists, if by pacifists you mean just sit back and let it all happen.
No, I didn't mean that.
Okay. Well, you know what I mean by
you're an
pacifist.
intelligent man. You don't know.
Yeah, the opposite of pacifist. Pacifist is activist, and we're activists. We're actively going out to build a new world, okay? In our daily life.
Would you take up arms for your faith?
Would we take up arms for our faith?
Yes.
No. One of the laws of Baha'u'llah is that we renounce violence. We renounce
Can I ask you?
To what extreme? Look at Iran. Look at the case in Iran and see the way the Baha'i community has responded to violence against it. See how the Baha'i...
What would you do? What would you do if every nation turned
Iran?
against you like that? If every nation decided to slaughter the Baha'is in their country and exterminate them, how would you defend yourself against that?
How did the Baha'is defend themselves?
Well, they ran away, it seems.
No, they didn't.
Can I just say...
They responded by respect to that government, by obedience to that government, okay? The only point at which we cannot do that is when we have to recant our faith, because at that point...
But that government wouldn't go as far as I'm saying. It was like Hitlerian kind of purge.
What happens to a Baha'i who recants his faith? He recants his faith. You're entitled to do that.
In some of your literature I read, you want world peace.
Yeah.
And yet I was amazed to read that nuclear disarmament was seen as a superficial subject on the path to well-being.
Ask anybody.
Nuclear weapons could destroy the whole planet.
You know,
that
when we
is
look...
singularly the most important thing to me.
To you, and I respect that, okay? Let me just say that if you look at the world today, the present feeling, the present understanding, the present belief is, among the majority of people, is that wonderful to talk about world peace, wonderful to talk about unity, but it's this light at the end of a long tunnel. We've got so much problems to deal with first. Is that generally accepted? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, stop me if I'm wrong.
Can you stop being so vague, and can you just tell me one special thing that you've done that's really good?
Where does nuclear weapons come into this whole process of world peace?
Most people see that as one of the things that has to be removed, and then eventually we'll get to world peace. Baha'is believe that in fact for world unity. Baha'is believe that actually if you look at all of these things, for the most part, they are not the illnesses, they are not the disease. The basic disease afflicting mankind today is disunity. Now, hang on, all of these problems are symptoms of that disease, and therefore if we establish unity, these will naturally, and we won't be able to believe how quickly they will become secondary.
You're talking about the unification of all religions, aren't you? You mentioned that in all your pamphlets. How are you going, as the Baha'i faith, how are you practically, now I want to be practical, not philosophical, practically, how are you going to unify all the religions and all the differences and all the struggles and all the different things? How are you practically going to do that? Unify all faiths.
Just look at the Baha'i community.
Oh, I'm going to practical steps.
Basically, like the real
temples in the first world, is that you're going to take. Never mind the Baha'i community. I want to know the practical steps.
I think the Baha'i community is not an idea, it's a practical, living reality. It is an example of what we believe in, okay, in practical terms.
Yeah, so are you
look at the Baha'i community, and you'll see people from Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, Jewish, Muslim backgrounds coming together for the first time.
But I know for the fact, okay, that a Baha'i, okay, cannot be a Christian, and a Christian cannot be a Baha'i, because you are asking a Christian to compromise the very essence of their faith by accepting that Baha'u'llah is a prophet of God. And I'm sorry,
actually,
as Christians, we cannot accept that.
I know you said you don't want to go into that. I'll just say one thing on it, because I think it might help to give us an idea. At the time of Christ, the Jews said exactly this to Christ. They said, how can we be asked to compromise our faith, okay, and to accept a new thing, okay, and we cannot be both. And Christ said, I come not to abolish, but to fulfill, okay? And in the same way that Christ was the fulfillment of what the Jews had been waiting for, Christians today are waiting for, have been for several hundred years, waiting for the promised one that Christ spoke about. Okay.
Are you telling me as a Christian that Baha'u'llah is the second coming of Jesus Christ?
That's right.
Great. And just suppose that's the case and everything's hunky-dory, and in the end there is a lot of world peace. You must talk of, I suppose then, eventually, a world language. What would the language be? Chinese, do you think? Because there are more Chinese in this world than anything else.
Baha'u'llah says that decision, because we do believe that there should be an international auxiliary language, just at least so we can communicate with each other.
Absolutely.
And that's fairly common sense now.
Makes a lot of sense. Oh, okay. I quite agree.
It was seen to be very radical only a few years ago, but okay, if we accept that, Baha'u'llah says that it is incumbent upon the rulers of the world, the governments of the world, to come together, okay, and this is a practical thing that Baha'is believe in.
And now you're talking politics.
And one of the things that they must do is to choose this thing.
What would the Baha'is have a vision? What would it be?
Not for me to decide.
Oh, you're the highest. It is. I'm asking you. What would it be, please?
If you heard what I said,
I did.
Baha'u'llah said that it will be, the choice of language will be the choice by election, by choice from the government of the world.
Let's be devil's advocate now. Let's be devil's advocate now, because I'd like to know, because if I were to join the Baha'i religion, I'd like to know that eventually, if there was to be world peace, which of course is what I'd want, and I think what we all want, really, what would the language be?
You know, I'm not a prophet. I don't know what that language is.
So you're not going to ask my question?
I don't know that question. I don't know the answer.
I just thought you might be able to give me some sort of hope.
I'd love to be able to. It would be naive and arrogant of me to try and say that I knew, because I don't know. No Baha'i knows. Okay?
You know, I talk about naive.
People have tried to establish Esperanto as a multinational language,
a lot
and
of
it's
Baha'is
failed.
study Esperanto, okay? But it's not for us to decide whether it is Esperanto, or English, or Arabic, or Chinese.
Well, if it's for this World Parliament to decide, what else is this World Parliament going to decide? What other powers will it have?
Okay.
As the thing from national government.
Did you read the document, The Promise of World Peace? Because that has in it almost the, it sounds naive, but almost like an agenda for things that must be decided.
And
one of those is the boundaries, the national territories, okay, must be agreed. I mean, that may sound silly to us here living on an island, but there are many parts of the world where that is a cause of great disunity.
Northern Ireland, for example. I mean, what happens there?
Whatever, okay?
Whatever.
No, I'm saying with regard to that, sorry, I may have missed your question.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is, I mean, that this World Parliament is just going to meet and look at the world, the map of the world, and draw lines where it wants to, and that's unity, is it?
No.
You know, to solve boundary problems.
You know, one of the things that the Baha'is, if you look at the Baha'i administration and you look at how the Baha'is operate, this is not a top-down, authoritative imposition. This
I'm aware of that.
From grassroots.
Yeah, I'm aware that the Parliament votes on it. I mean, what I want to know is, why should some guy or girl from China or Russia or Argentina have a vote on what happens to the people of Northern Ireland? You know, why should that happen? Why should that happen?
One of the things, I don't think that what I'm saying is that they should have a vote in what happens in Northern Ireland. What I'm saying, as a Baha'i, my understanding is that the world is almost, the humanity, all the peoples of the world with different colors and backgrounds, are almost like they are a single system. They are interconnected. No country in this world can separate itself from the other country.
Why have national boundaries?
How do you Because we need to administer, okay? For the sake of administration, we need smaller units and then smaller units and a process, okay, almost like a tree, you know, that has...
Have you got a house?
Sorry,
Have you got a house?
How do you see heaven? How do I see heaven? I think heaven is that state of being that is close to God, okay? That condition of doing what God wants us to do.
I'm not going to become a Baha'i, right? So what's going to happen to me? I'm not going to get into heaven then.
Who do you think I am? I'm not here to judge you and to tell you where you're going. That is for God. That is for God.
Do you have to have a religious
your
faith
God is a Baha'i
in order
God.
to go to heaven? Do you have to believe in God? If I'm a good person, but I don't have a religious faith, will I still go to heaven?
You know,
Is my goodness accepted by the Baha'i?
goodness is not a question of labels and packaging.
I think if you were going to
The
say
fact that
where
you
should you
stick a
finish that
label
away?
Baha'i on you doesn't mean that you have a guarantee to heaven.
Baha'i faith.
The Bab occupies a place in religious history very similar to that of John the Baptist. He was a forerunner of Baha'u'llah, who was the founder of the Baha'i faith.
Dr. Robert Hallam runs a farm high on the moors above Bradford. He is also a Baha'i, a member of a worldwide religious community which began over 100 years ago in Iran and was inspired by the teachings of a man who called himself the Bab. Today is the anniversary of the Bab's death.
Almost every religion, established religion, has a promise of a new messenger to come at some time in the future. And down the history, this has occurred about every 1,000 years. There was an expectation in Iran at the time that there would be a new messenger, the 12th Imam. And the Bab was in fact that messenger. He was being sought out by religious scholars of the time, and a group had gone to Shiraz, a city about 800 miles south of Tehran. And when the party arrived, 2 were sent off to seek accommodation, and 1 waited outside the city and was met by the young man, who finally turned out to be the Bab, who introduced him to his new message. The Bab was seen as a political threat, and eventually the government were persuaded that he should be executed. And the divines of the time did not want precisely what we've got now, a recognition of the Bab as a martyr. So his remains were cast into a dry moat on the outskirts of the city in Tabriz. And a follower, by cover of darkness, gathered up those remains, and they were hidden in a silk factory, put into a casket, and actually walled up. And from time to time, when the rumours emerged that the Bab's remains were still in existence, they were moved from place to place and finally taken to the Holy Land. And the shrine of the Bab was erected on Mount Carmel. And at the later stage, a golden covering to the dome was fitted, and that has now become a mark on the maritime maps for the Mediterranean. It can be seen from many miles out to sea. The Bab had exhorted his followers to turn to, and he quoted, he whom God shall make manifest. And in fact, he was Baha'u'llah. Both the Bab and Baha'u'llah are Arabic words. The Bab means gate, Baha'u'llah means glory of God. Baha'u'llah had originally been a follower of the Bab. Being a Babi, he was cast into prison. And whilst he was in prison, he got a vision, a visitation, when he knew that his mission was to take over the ministry of the Bab and found the Bahai faith. Bahai means enlightened. The followers of major religions have always looked forward to peace, heaven on earth, if you like. But within the Bahai faith, the followers have been promised that world peace will be established. The lesser peace by the year 2000. And by lesser peace is meant the absence of armed conflict. There will still be differences and disputes, but that will lay a foundation to a move forward to what Baha'u'llah has described as the most great peace. As with all the religions, the untimely end of its founder is an important thing to commemorate. And this occurred in 1850 at noon in the square in Tabriz. The Bab was executed by firing squad. At noon, throughout the world, local communities will gather. They will read an account of his martyrdom. They will read prayers revealed by the Bab, and in a dignified atmosphere, remember that this was the origin of the Baha'i faith.